excitement.
Where's that room? I think, Steve, are you doing that now? Second repetition of the Kol Nidre, or I just go and then Melanie go?
It's fine if Melanie just kind of plug right into it.
All right. It's going to be pretty quick, but it's Melanie's thing, so give her a second to get settled into it. Yeah.
Speaking of Melanie, does she know that we're actually going to start on time?
It's a valid question, for which I have no answer, but she was here. She's in her office, I think. You know.
With your own
I
eyes?
saw her.
What?
You saw her.
She was here.
You saw her.
I saw her.
With your eyes.
With, yes. Oh, that's right. Oh, we got this. Oof.
Is that the right day?
Yeah.
Having some issues with printing them.
Where is that room?
What do you think of the new light bulb?
Nice. Nice.
Stole it from our Hanukkah menorahs there.
Before that.
וטוב וישר לכיוון מאה שאומרים כל נדרי אלפא הוא נדר ותקופה כי מותר ומבוטל כמו הנוסח התיקוני ואין להוסיף ואין לגרוע.
Well, the Kol Nidre comes right away, so come on up.
We'll be beginning in just a moment or two. Just want to get a check. Moises Fryman, can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. Good to know. You know, the imagery of Kol Nidre Eve, Torah, becomes an important symbol. And what's really happening on Kol Nidre is that when the Torahs are removed from the ark and they're held on either side of the Chazan, you're forming a Beit Din, a court of three. And you need to have a Beit Din, you need to have a court, because through the chanting of Kol Nidre, you are in effect releasing vows that have been made by people in the course of the year. So it is a legal action, hence you form the court. That's why, by the way, Kol Nidre must start before sundown. Kol Nidre starts before sundown because it's not permitted for a Jewish court to meet after sundown on a Yontif day. So you start before sundown. In a normal year, the Torahs are removed from the ark, 2 Torahs, and the 2 Torahs together with the Chazan form that Beit Din to release us from our mistaken promises and, I hope, from our mistakes. We're not going to be taking the Torahs out of the ark tonight because of the strange time that we're living in. But when we chant Kol Nidre, we will be opening the ark, and of course, the tradition is to rise. Also, we will not be processing the Torahs through the congregation tonight, as you've seen through Yontif, throughout the Yontif season, and also on Shabbos as well, if you've been at Shabbos services. Just let a few folks come in and take their seats. Welcoming everyone joining us here in the Offit Auditorium tonight for Kol Nidre services, the beginning of Yom Kippur, and also all those who are joining us online tonight and watching the services at home. A new halachic question, a new shaila has been asked. If you're watching Kol Nidre services at home, may you eat as you watch Kol Nidre services. I won't answer that question. Leave that to people's conscience. I'll ask if you please take your machzorim, and we'll begin on page 203. 203, far English side. Reading together, a meditation before Yom Kippur. Again, it's page 203. I hereby forgive all who have hurt me, all who have done me wrong, whether deliberately or by accident, whether by word or by deed. May no one be punished on my account, as I forgive and pardon fully those who have done me wrong. May those whom I have harmed by word or by deed forgive and pardon me, whether I acted deliberately or by accident. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. We'll pause at this time to remember with reverence the yartzites of our beloved departed observed until sundown this evening, the 9th day of Tishrei. Joseph Herman Eisenberg, Ethel Fulton, Fanny Gerber, Jerome Goldfein, Ida Dorothy Height, Bernard Karras, Mayer Kramer, William Leon, Philip Lerman, Donald Levy, Dorothy Lippman, Evelyn McDonald, William Mailman, Isidore Miller, Ada K. Rubel, Helen Scissors, Sally Shanbrun, Harry Emanuel Siegel, Nathan Verona, and Kurt B. Zion. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may their righteous memories continue to bring blessing into all of our lives, together saying to that, Amen. In solemn testimony to that unbroken chain of faith that we believe links us l'dor vador, one generation to the next, those who are in mourning, anyone else, if you are observing Yartzeit, will you please rise for Mourner's Kaddish? Find the text of the Kaddish, page 247. 247, Kaddish Yatom. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Bialma divrach hirute v'yamlich malchute. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'izman kari v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevorach la'olam u'lalmei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudsha barichu. Leila le'ela mikol birchata b'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran bi'alma v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imrumav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Amen.
If you're standing for the Kaddish, you may be seated. And we'll turn back in our Machzorim to page 204 for Or Zarua. I'll ask if you'll please rise at this time. We will open the Ark. Middle of page 204.
Or Zarua Latadik Ole Yishrei Lev Simcha 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 Or Zarua Latadik
צדיק ולישרי לב שמחה.
And on page 204, B'Yeshiva Shel Mala.
בישיבה של מעלה
By the authority of the court on high
ובישיבה של מטה
and the authority of this court below,
על דעת המקום
with divine consent
ועל דעת הקהל
and the consent of the congregation,
אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים.
we grant tonight permission to pray with those who have transgressed.
בישיבה של מעלה
By authority of the court on high
ובישיבה של מטה
and the authority of this court below,
על דעת המקום
with divine consent
ועל דעת הקהל
and the consent of this congregation,
אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים.
we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed.
בישיבה של מעלה
The authority of the court on high
ובישיבה של מטה
and the authority of this court below,
על דעת המקום
consent from God
ועל דעת הקהל
and consent from the congregation,
אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים.
we tonight grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. We turn to page 205, top of that page, for Kol Nidre.
כל נדרי ושרי וחרמי וקונמי וכינויי וכינוסי דין דרנה ודאיש דבנה ודאחרימנה ודיעזרנה על נפשותנו דינדרנה ודאיש תבנה ודאחרימנה ודאחרימנה ודא אסרנה על nafshatana miom kippurim ad yom kippurim Aleinu letova kolon icharatna veon kolon yon sharan yon sharan yon sharan Shavitin, Shavikin, Batelin, Umevutalin, La Sheririn, Vela Kayamin, Nidrana, La Nidre, Vezarana, La Vezare, O Shevuata, Anna, La Shavuot.
Yehon Shiran, Yehon Shiran, Yehon Shiran, Shvikin, Shvitin, Betelin, Umevutalin, Sharirin, Vilakayamin, Nidrana, la Nidre, Vesorana, la Esare. Shivuatana, la Shivut.
Reading together. All vows, renunciations, bans, oaths, formulas of obligation, pledges, and promises that we vow or promise to ourselves and to God from this Yom Kippur to the next, may it approach us for good, we hereby retract. May they all be undone, repealed, canceled, voided, annulled, and regarded as neither valid nor binding. Our vows shall not be considered vows. Our renunciations shall not be considered renunciations. Our promises shall not be considered promises.
Nidre, Ve'esarei, Acharamei, Ve'konamei, Ve'chinuyei, Ve'kinusei, Ushvut. Din darna Udei Shavana Udeacharimna Vediasarna al nafshatana Dindarana Udeishtavana Udeacha Acharimna Ode Acharimna Veda Asarana Al Nafshatana Miom Kippurim Ad Yom Kippurim Abba Aleinu Letova Kolon Icharatna Vehon Kolon Yeon Sharan Yeon Sharan Yeon Sharan Shavitikin Shavitin Betelin Mevotalin La Sharirin La Kayamin Nidrana La Nidre Vesarana La Sare Jevoatana La Shavuot En Yislach Lechol Adat Bnei Yisrael Velaker Agar Betocham Ki lechol ha'am Bi Shregaga V'nislach lecha ולקר הקר בתוכם כי לכל העם בי שגגה ונסלח לכל עדת בני ישראל ולקר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בי שגגה. סלח לנו העם הזה כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה, ושם נאמר, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
As the ark is closed, you may certainly be seated. My name is Rabbi Steve Schwartz. So I was trying to figure out how many years it's been since I had the opportunity to share some of Yontif with all of you here in the Offit. And I'm thinking at least 6 or 7 years since we combined the second day Rosh Hashanah services. You'll remember second day, Cantor King and I, and before I was the senior rabbi, Rabbi Loeb and Cantor King would come in to do the second day services here in the Offit. It's been at least 6 or 7 years since we're combined second day, maybe longer than that, might be a decade. And then before that, the opportunity to work with my friend and colleague Michael Leslie, which has always been a great pleasure. And that, you probably have to go back 13 years or 14 years, and to see so many friendly faces, and also to welcome so many who are joining us online tonight. So I'm grateful that I can be here with all of you. And I think, like all of us together, just praying for a year that's sweet and healthy and full of all the things that we hope to find at this moment, looking forward to when we'll be together next year, welcoming next Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If you think about the two holidays together, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we call them in English the High Holy Days, is how we usually refer to them. And in Hebrew, we call them, anybody know? The Yamim Noraim, probably best translated as the days of awe. So the sense is we call them the same thing, they're part and parcel, and almost like they're twin holidays. Like there's nothing that distinguishes them, and it's true that if you look at the prayers that we recite, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, number of the prayers, not all of them, but many of them overlap. And of course, some of the themes at least, some of the motifs of the holidays overlap as well. But I would argue that if you dig just a little bit under the surface, you don't have to go that far, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are really very different holidays. They're different in feel, they're different in tone, and I would say also different in intent. Now, some of the most obvious differences, maybe the most obvious of all, is that on Rosh Hashanah we feast, and on Yom Kippur we fast. Good. This is like that game on NPR. You ever listen Sunday morning, like it's the puzzle game? Okay, let's try another one. Rosh Hashanah we celebrate. Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur, I would say we contemplate. Rosh Hashanah celebrate, Yom Kippur contemplate. Rosh Hashanah afternoon, we spend our time, of course, eating Rosh Hashanah lunch and then kibitzing with our families and our friends, hopefully. And some of us go to Tashlich. Yom Kippur afternoon. Steve said walk the park. I was going to say take a nap. Isn't that what most people do? Rabbis don't so much get to do that, although if you catch me at the right time in my office tomorrow afternoon, I can't promise you my eyes will be open. Rosh Hashanah thematically, is about the world. We say in the liturgy, the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, that it's Yom Harat Olam, which means the birthday of the world. So Rosh Hashanah has a kind of a universal feel to it, universal concerns. Yom Kippur is not global like that. Yom Kippur is about us. It's about our own lives. It's about looking inward to who we are. So it's much, much more intimate than Rosh Hashanah. And the last thing is Rosh Hashanah, I think, is noisy. It's a noisy holiday. I mean, even the central symbol of the holiday, which has to be the shofar, at the end of the day, what's the shofar but a noise maker? And the services are loud. There's a lot of tumult. And the shofar itself in a traditional service is sounded 100 times. A Yom Kippur is not that way. A Yom Kippur is somber, and it's quiet, and it has this sense of seriousness to it until tomorrow evening. As Ne'ilah is coming, the sun is going down, and we begin to feel the joy of having gone through this day of self-reflection and introspection, and then our hearts lighten, and we declare this audible and joyous end to Rosh Hashanah, to the day of judgment, to the time of judgment, and we sound that great Tekiah Gedolah. But up until that point, at least my experience of Yom Kippur is that it's a somber day. Now, this year was really wonderful to welcome people back to the building and to celebrate the joy and the noise and the tumult and the kibitzing and the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Seasons change, and New Year on the liturgical calendar begins. And there's an old rabbinic dictum that comes to my mind, Kal Hashana ukalotecha, tachel shana uvirchotecha. So you close a year and all of its bad things, like shut the book and let's move forward, and you open a year with the hope that in that new year you will find blessings. And I think in the COVID age, which is what we have to call this time, we have an even deeper understanding of how much we need those communal moments of celebration and joy to lift our spirits. But I would argue that we also need, and maybe we've also learned this in a deeper way, that we also need the quiet and contemplation of this day, of a Yom Kippur day. We need time to think. We need time to reflect. We need what our tradition calls cheshbon nefesh. It's an accounting of our lives. And I think it can only happen properly on Yom Kippur. Here's the problem. Our world today, it's hard to find time just to sit down quietly and to think. I mean, it's something I struggle with terribly. It's a noisy world. I went out to walk the dog the other day. It's where I get most of my good thinking done, actually. When I'm walking the dog, a lot of my sermon arranging happens when I'm out walking the dog. We have a new puppy. She's 8 months old. Maybe I should say she walks me because she drags me around the neighborhood. That's another conversation. But why do I get my thinking done out there? Because it's quiet. Because there's no phone ringing. There's no one talking to me. I mean, the dog doesn't yet talk. Okay, so we're working on that as well. But a couple of days ago, I'm hoping to get a little thinking done because Yontif is coming. I got stuff to do, I got things to think about. And I go out expecting a quiet neighborhood, and my luck, every single lawn in the neighborhood was being cut at precisely that moment on exactly the same day. So every lawnmower is buzzing, every edger is edging and whirring and whizzing. The leaf blowers were blowing as well. And I realized that's a lot like our lives today. That's a lot like our lives. There's constant noise. And the noise isn't only audible noise. There's a tremendous amount today of what I would call digital noise. And when I say that, what I mean is the constant stream of information that comes to us nonstop, over and over and over, the emails and the texts and the social media alerts and the news headlines and the sports scores. You can take your pick. In a metaphoric sense, the smartphone is probably the noisiest object that's ever been invented. The noisiest object that's ever been invented. And yet, what do? We keep them with us all the time. And most of the time, not only do we have them with us, we have them right in our hands. So in that kind of world, when do you have time to sit down and quietly think? So I would suggest that that's what we do during these 25 hours of Yom Kippur. That's the time. It's our opportunity to shut off the phones, to take a step back from the world that is all around us, and to immerse ourselves in the quiet and the calm, to stop looking outward, but to instead look inward and to contemplate where we've been and where we're headed. It is uninterrupted time to think and to reflect. And that begs a question, which is, what should we be thinking about? What should we be thinking about on Yom Kippur? Now, I'm guessing that you probably come to any Yom Kippur evening and day with a fairly long list of things in your mind that you would like to consider over the next 25 hours. Things that have happened to you in the year that's gone by, struggles that you've faced, challenges that you've had to confront, and I hope you've been able to overcome them. Looking inward, contemplating where we've been and where we're headed. So that's your own agenda. But with your permission, I would like to add at least a few items to whatever personal list you've come into shul with tonight. Certainly at the top of that list, it would have to be that cheshbon hanefesh, that personal accounting of our lives. So every person in this room and everyone who's watching online tonight knows that that's one of the things that you're supposed to do when you come into shul. On Yom Kippur, you're supposed to say, who am I? What is my life all about? And am I doing okay? You know what? You can't do that on a smartphone. There's no accounting cheshbon hanefesh app. There's no app for that, right? There's no app for that. Tomorrow afternoon, mincha services. I hope you'll come back. Book of Jonah is read, the Maftir Yonah. And I'm sure you remember that at the beginning of the story, Jonah is called by God to go to Nineveh to deliver a prophecy to Nineveh's people. So God calls Jonah. Does anyone remember what Jonah does? He runs away. Yeah, he runs away. God calls Jonah, and immediately it says, Vayakom Yonah libroch Tarshisha. That's what the text says. So right away, Jonah hears God's call. Jonah gets up, and he runs as far away as he possibly can. And the way I've always understood that moment is that Jonah is running away from God, right? I mean, that's the way it seems. That seems to be the pshat, what we would say, the plain meaning of the text. He doesn't want the responsibility. He doesn't want to deal with it. So what does he do? He runs away. We've all done it. We've all done it one time or another. But we've been studying over the last few weeks the book of Jonah and some commentaries on the book. In Talmud class, Michael's here, we meet Thursday afternoons. And someone suggested in class just a couple of weeks ago, as we're looking at the text, that maybe what is actually happening there, it's not that Jonah is running away from God, he's running away from himself. He's so uncomfortable with himself and how he's been living in his own skin day to day to day that he can't bear to look at his own life, and he actually can't take the time to realize who he actually is. And so he considers himself unworthy of undertaking God's mission. He says to himself, how could God choose me? I don't deserve it. And that's the psychological action in Jonah's mind. So Yom Kippur comes along and says, you can't run away from who you are. You can't run away from the divine mission that living as a human being imposes upon us. Judaism suggests to us that we are part of God's divine plan for the world, for the universe, and that we, in our own lives, are capable of helping in furthering that mission, of carrying out God's mission, or maybe missions is a better way to say it. And that is true despite any reservations that we might have about our own worth or past deeds that we're sitting here tonight worrying about. The good news of Yom Kippur is that you can change. You can change for the better, change your life, make steps forward, and do better than you've done before. But you first have to do the work to understand what needs to be changed. How are you going to know what you're supposed to change unless you've thought it through and understood it fully? I'm not saying tonight, I don't mean to suggest that in the next 25 hours you can do all of that work. It probably will take significantly longer than that. But I think at least being here on Kol Nidre night, being here tomorrow on the Yom Kippur, the tradition is inviting us to begin, at least to begin the process of doing that work. Also, goes without saying, another thing we're supposed to spend a good part of the next 25 hours thinking about is sin. And that's another theme, obviously, that sets Yom Kippur apart from Rosh Hashanah. You think about davening last week. There are no lists of Hashamnus in the Rosh Hashanah davening. There are no Al-Chaitz in the Rosh Hashanah davening. But tonight and tomorrow, we're going to chant the Hashamnu, we're going to beat our chests, we're going to say the Al-Chaitz how many times? At least 5. Yeah, say it at least 5 times when you count through. So the Yom Kippur liturgy, every single time we come into shul throughout the next 25 hours, really confronts us. It challenges us. It confronts us with our failures and our faults. I don't know about you. Every time I read through one of the lists of sins, particularly the Al-Chait list, every time I read through it, at some point during the day, something catches my attention, and I say, ooh, that's one I really got to work on. I mean, it happens every single year. And many years, it's more than one thing. So we have to think about what it means to sin and what it means to repair sin, what it means to get back on track from the mistakes that we've made. You know what else we're supposed to do on Yom Kippur is just remember. And you can't remember in the tumult of the busy world today either. So what do we want to remember? We should remember that we are Jews. We should remember that Jewish values are supposed to shape us and guide us in our lives. We should remember that Jewish history is something that should be important to us and that we should be knowledgeable about. Think about tomorrow and tomorrow morning, and we'll come together just as the Torah service is getting ready to conclude, and we recite Yizkor. What does Yizkor mean? It means memory, to remember. And in doing Yizkor and reciting Yizkor, what do? We remember the people with whom we have shared the journey of our years. Remember also that a year has gone by, and the events that have defined us, not just in that year, but in our lives, those also come back into our minds during the Yom Tov season. And remember also that we say that God remembers as well. One last thing for sure the tradition wants us to consider during Yom Kippur, and that is teshuvah. So you all know what teshuvah is. Tell me what it means. What? So return is one, okay? And atonement, we commonly would say. It's usually one of those two things. It's either atonement, we do teshuvah, we atone, right, for our sins, or it means to return, to come back to something. But in fact, it also has a different meaning, because teshuvah means to answer. If there's a shaila, a question, there's a teshuvah. A tshuva means an answer. So if our doing tshuva means that we're offering a reply, what is the question, or maybe better to say, what are the questions that we are answering, that we are responding to? I'm going to suggest 3. The first 2 are closely connected with the birth of God's universe and going back to the earliest stories that we have in Genesis of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. And you'll remember also this story. Having eaten forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve are attempting to hide from God, sort of an echo, or I guess Jonah, an echo of their behavior. And God appears, and God asks this very weighted question. It's really just one word in the Hebrew. The question is, ayeka, means, where are you? Where are you? Where are you hiding? Why are you hiding? What are you fearful of? And that's a question for each of us to ask on a Yom Kippur evening. Then you go just a few verses later in Genesis, and Cain at this point has slain his brother Abel. And God again appears with a question. Hevel achicha, God asks, where is your brother Abel? Has Abel disappeared from you? Have you thought about who Abel is supposed to be and how you were supposed to treat him? Has he run away because you mistreated him? Or is something even worse than that happens? Do you have so little compassion for your brother that you actually caused his death? And that's also a question that each of us have to, not in that exact precise way, but in the metaphor of who is our brother in our community, in our country, in our world, and how are we being responsible for them? And then a third question confronts us tomorrow morning when we hear the great text of Isaiah read for the Yom Kippur morning Haftarah. And you know the text well. Is this the fast that I desire? A day for people to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? Do you call that a day which God will find favorable? And Isaiah responds to his own question. No, that's not the fast I desire. The fast I desire is this: to unlock fetters of wickedness, to untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every bind. It's to share your bread with the hungry, to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and do not ignore your own brother, your own flesh. These are the very questions that the quiet time of Yom Kippur invites us to consider. And for each of us to offer a tshuva, to offer what is our answer to that question going to be in this year. Ayeka, where are you right now? Where do you want to be? Hevel achicha, what is your responsibility to your fellow human being? Hakazeh yetzom evcharehu, is this the fast that I desire in your religious life? Are you doing what you really think God wants you to be doing? In the somber quiet of Kol Nidre Eve, I pray, and I think each of us does, that we discover a meaningful teshuvah, a meaningful answer to each of those questions, an answer to fill our lives with purpose, with promise, to fill our homes and our families with love and caring, to fill our community with a generosity of spirit that will make a difference so it's a better place for all of us to live in, and our world to be filled with peace, and our planet to be filled with hope for the future. Then we can dream that the words of Isaiah also from tomorrow morning's Haftarah will be fulfilled. When you called me Adonai, when you called me God, I answered, and I said, Hineni, here I am. Shana Tova, good Yantif, and Tzom Kal, Tzom Kal. We are going to resume services with the formal beginning of Mariv, the evening service. Starts with the Baruch Hu. You can find it on page 207 as we rise together. Page 207.
Baruch et Adonai Amevorach Amevorach Baruch Adonai Amevorach Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Adonai Amevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Umavir yom umevi layla umavdi leben yom uven layla Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai המריב ערבים, אהבת עולם בי.
On page 208.
כי אם חיינו ויארך ימינו ובהם נגע יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל.
Rising together for the Shema, middle of page 208.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך ובביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ושוכבך וקומך. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך. וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
May be seated, continuing page 209. Share Anochi Mitzvatchem. Unitati Mitzvatchem. An English side, reading together, second paragraph. Therefore, impress these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul. Bind them as a sign upon your hand and as a symbol above your eyes. Teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your home, when you walk on your way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Inscribe them upon the doorposts of your homes, on your gates, then the length of your days and the days of your children, on the land that Adonai swore to give to your ancestors, will be as the days of the heavens over the earth. Shema's third paragraph. Yomer Adonai, El Moshe Lemor.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Turning to page 210, middle of that page.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא מלכותך רבניך בוקי הים לפני משה זלינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גואל ישראל השכיבנו ופרס עלינו סוכת של עמך ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
On page 212.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יש מי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתבר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמיה ואמרו Amen.
Rising together, evening Amidah for Yom Kippur begins on page 213, concludes on page 221. Traditionally recited quietly. Quiet prayer beginning page 213. encourage you to take your time if you're still davening. And we will turn to the beginning of this sort of quasi-repetition section, recitation of the Slichot prayers, which is unique to Kol Nidre Eve and the liturgy of this night. It starts on page 223 with the Ya'aleh, sense we have of hoping that our supplications will rise up to God. Ya'aleh, page 223.
יעלה תחנוננו מערב ויבוא שרתנו מבוקר וירא רינוננו עד ערב יעלה קולנו מערב ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר וירא פדיוננו עד ערב יעלה עינוינו מערב ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר וירא נאקתנו עד ערב יעלה מנוסנו מערב ויבוא למענו מבוקר וירא כיפורנו עד ערב יעלה ישענו מערב ויבוא טהרנו מבוקר וירא חינוננו עד ערב יעלה זיכרוננו מערב ויבוא ויודענו מבוקר וירא הדרתנו עד ערב יעלה דופקנו מערב ויבוא גילנו מבוקר וירא בקשתנו עד ערב יעלה אנקתנו מערב ויבוא אליך מבוקר וירא אלינו עד ערב.
Turning to page 225, and we'll read responsively, English side. Page 225, responsive reading. We come before you relying on who you are.
Nature, help us.
You are known as gracious, compassionate God. Your way is to be patient with sinners, not only with the righteous. That is the source of our praise for you. Grant relief to this driven leaf. Have compassion on that which is but dust and ashes. Turning to page 226.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Nosei avon v'fesha, V'chata v'nakeh, V'salach lavonenu, Ulchatatenu nchaltanu. Selach lanu avinu ki chatanu, Mechalanu malkeinu ki fashanu, Ki ata Adonai tov v'salach, V'rav chesed lechol korecha.
The Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanan is woven into the Yom Kippur liturgy. We'll see it multiple times tonight. It comes up tomorrow multiple times as well. Still in the Elah, we're hearing Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanan. Question is why? Why does it become a Yom Kippur theme? Anyone know where the verse is from? I don't know if it says actually in the Machzor. It does. So you just have to look it up. So it's Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7. Okay, now the question is, what's going on in the Torah there? And this is sort of the denouement from the sin of the golden calf episode. So this is Moses on the mountain pleading with God for forgiveness for the sin of the Israelites and Aaron in worshiping the golden calf. And the Adonai, Adonai El Rachum V'Chanan is God's response to Moses, essentially assuring Moses that God will forgive Israel for Israel's grave sin, and that God will reestablish a second set of covenantal tablets so that Moses can, yes, bring the covenant to the people, and that covenant will exist moving forward. And the sense of the tradition in terms of the Talmud chronologically is that the second set of tablets are granted on Yom Kippur Day, on the 10th of Tishrei. And so they weave this verse into the liturgy to remind us that God forgave the sin of the golden calf. And here, we haven't sinned like that. I mean, however we've sinned, it's nothing compared to that. And if God forgave that, then we should be in good shape. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanan. That is God's assurance, continues for us to this very day. Turning to page 227, Kihine Kachomer, many images presented to us of God throughout the Machzor. God is judge. Here the image is that God is creator. Kihine Kachomer.
כי הנה כחומר ביד היוצר, ברצותו מרחיב וברצותו מקצר, כן אנחנו בידך חסד נוצר, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר, כי הנה כאבן ידם סתת, ברצותו חס וברצותו מחתת, כן אנחנו בידך מחיה וממוטט, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר, כי הנה כגרזן ביד החרש, ברצותו דיבק לאור וברצותו פירש, כן אנחנו בידך תומכני ורש, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר, כי הנה כהגה ביד המלאך, ברצותו חס וברצותו שילח, כן אנחנו בידך אל טוב וסלח, לברית הבט, אל תפן ליצר, כי הנה כזכוכית ביד המזגג, ברצותו חוגג וברצותו ממוגג, כן אנחנו בידך מוכל זדון ושגג, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר, כי הנה קייריה ביד הרוקם, ברצותו מיישר וברצותו מיקם, כן אנחנו בידך אל כנו ונוקם, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר, כי הנה ככסף ביד הצורף, ברצותו משגשג וברצותו מצרף, כן אנחנו בידך ממציא למזור טרף, לברית הבט, ואל תפן ליצר.
As we turn to page 233, we'll rise together. The ark will be open for Shema Kolenu. 233.
Shema Koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Chos v'rachem aleinu v'kabel berachamim uveratzon et filateinu.
Shema Koleinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Chus v'rachem aleinu, v'kabel berachem v'ratzon et tfilateinu.
Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Kadesh Yameinu kekedem.
Shivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu kekedem.
Al tashlichenu milfanecha veruach kodshecha al tikach mimenu.
Shlichenu milfanecha v'ruach kodshecha al tikach mimenu.
Al tishlechenu le'et zikna kichlat kocheinu al tazveinu.
Heinu lezikna, chachenu al tazveinu.
Al tazveinu Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Eloheinu.
Ark will be closed. You may be seated. Continuing on page 234, Ki Anu Amecha.
Eloheinu v'elei avoteinu v'imotenu Selach lanu mechalanu kapelanu Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu anu vanecha ve'ata avinu anu avadecha ve'ata Adonenu anu kahalecha ve'ata chelkeinu anu nachalatecha ve'ata goraleinu anu tzanecha ve'ata ro'einu anu charmecha ve'ata notreinu anu fiulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu anu rayatecha ve'ata dodeinu anu segulatecha ve'ata kroveinu anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu anu mamirecha ve'ata mamireinu anu azeifanim ve'ata rachum v'chanun anu k'shei orev ve'ata erech apayim anu melei avon ve'ata malei rachamim anu yameinu ketzei lover ve'atahu u'shenoteincha lo yitamu.
Top of page 235, rising together for the Ashamnus.
Ay, 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 ay. Ashamnu,
Ashamnu,
Bagadnu,
Agadnu,
Gazalnu,
Azalnu,
Dibanu Dofi,
Ibarnu Dofi,
Evinu,
Evinu,
Vehirshanu,
Vehirshanu,
Zadnu,
Zadnu,
Hamasnu,
Amasnu,
Tafalnu Sheker,
Afalnu Shek,
ay, 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 Ya'atnu Ra,
Atsnura,
Kizavnu,
Izavnu,
Latnu,
Atsnu,
Maradnu,
Aradnu,
Niatnu,
Iatsnu,
Sararnu,
Thararnu,
Avinu,
Avinu,
Pashanu,
Ashanu,
Tararnu,
Thararnu,
Kishinu Oref,
Inu Ore,
ay, 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 Rashanu,
Ashanu,
Shichatnu,
Shichatnu,
Tiavnu,
Tiavnu,
Tainu,
Ainu,
Titanu,
Titanu,
ay, 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 ay. צעדנו מזוודך וממשפטיך הטובים ולא שבה לנו, ואתה צדיק על כל הבא עלינו, כי אתה אמת עשית, ואנחנו הרשענו.
We'll remain standing, turning to page 237, the Al-Khait.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס וברצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בבלי דעת, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בביטוי שפתיים, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי עריות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגלוי ובסתר, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בדעת ובמרמה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בדיבור פה, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בהונאת ריח, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בהרהור הלב, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעידות זנות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בווידוי פה, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול הורים ומורים, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזדון ובשגגה, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחילול השם, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטומאת שפתיים, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטיפשות פה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך, ביודעים ובלא יודעים. ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
Reading responsively, English side. We have sinned against you through denial and deceit.
And sinned against you by taking bribes.
We have sinned against you by clever cynicism. We have sinned against you by the way we do business. We have sinned against you by greed and oppressive interest. We have sinned against you in everyday conversation. We have sinned against you through condescension. For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצדיעת ריח, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצרות עין, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בקלות ראש, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בקשיות עורף, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בריצת רגליים להרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשבועת שווא, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתימהון לבב. ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
Turning to page 243, the ark will be open for Avinu Malkeinu.
אבינו מלכנו, חטאנו לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, אין לנו מלך אלא אתה. אבינו מלכנו, עשה עמנו למען שמך. אבינו מלכנו, חדש עלינו שנה טובה. אבינו מלכנו, בטל מעלינו כל גזירות קשות. אבינו מלכנו, בטל מחשבות שונאינו. אבינו מלכנו, הפר עצת אויבינו. אבינו מלכנו, כלה כל צר ומסטין מעלינו. אבינו מלכנו, כלה דבר וחרב ורעב ושבי ומשחית ועוון ושמד מבני בריתך. אבינו מלכנו, סלח ומחל לכל עוונותינו. אבינו מלכנו מחה ועבר פשענו וחטאותינו מנגד עיניך. אבינו מלכנו החזירנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך. אבינו מלכנו שלח רפואה שלמה לחולי עמך. אבינו מלכנו זכרנו בזיכרון טוב לפניך. אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר חיים טובים. אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר גאולה וישועה. אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר פרנסה וכלכלה. אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר זכויות. אבינו מלכנו כותבנו בספר סליחה ומחילה. אבינו מלכנו עצמך אלוקינו.
אבינו קרן ישראל עמך, אבינו מלכנו, אבינו קרן משיחך.
אבינו מלכנו עשה למען באי שמיים קידוש שמך.
קם מלפניך, זכור כי עפר אנחנו. עשה למען.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Koleinu Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu Chamol aleinu Ve'alol aleinu V'tali peinu Avinu Malkeinu Kale dever V'cherev v'rav Me'aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Kale cholzar Umastin Me'aleinu
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'oshienu.
Ark will be closed. You may be seated. Continuing with the full Kaddish, page 245. 245.
יתקלל ויתקדש שמי רבם, ועלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבם מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו תתקבל צלתן ובאותן דכל ישראל קודם אבוהן דבישמיה ואמרו יהי שלום הרבים שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגר עלינו ככל עוונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך שעונות השמיים. על כן נקווינו. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
And we will pause at this time to remember with reverence the yahrzeits of our beloved departed. Observe sundown this evening till sundown tomorrow evening, 10th day of Tishrei. Ruth Lindner Barth, Abraham Simon Berlin, Rose S. Cheslock, Lucille Kogan, Milton Mickey Cohen, Sadie Eagle, Leo Farkas, William Forsheimer, Rose Friedler, Lillian Goldberg, Isidore J. Gradman, Sarah Jane Grant, Gershon Huddles, Michael Jaffe, J. Allen Coleman, Jerome Katz, Mitchell L. Katz, Mitchell Lackow, Adolph Lindner, Ida Maisie, Barney Offit, Rebecca Oidick, Leroy A. Posner, Herman Raifman, Bertram Rudy, Edward M. Thompson, Mark Warto, Eva Zinker-Wurtzer, Solomon Zinker-Wurtzer, and Simon Woolman. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Their righteous memories continue to bring blessing into our lives every day, together saying Amen. And in solemn testimony to that unbroken chain of faith, those who are in mourning, anyone else, if you are observing Yahrzeit, please rise. Mourner's Kaddish, page 247. 247, Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. B'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach la'olam u'lalmei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudsha barichu. Leila leila mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Seh shalom b'imrumav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May be seated. Schedule of services for tomorrow: services in the morning, starting both here in the Offit and in the Berman Reuben at 9:30, and then Torah service approximately 10:30 tomorrow morning. Yisker will be about 11:15, 11:30 in that range, and the sermon, give or take, 11:45 or noon, and Musaf, of course, to follow. Intermission tomorrow afternoon from 2 to 4:15. 4:15 will reconvene, open forum at 4:15, to be followed by martyrology. Martyrology should start at about 5. 5:30 we'll have the Mincha service, 6:30 Ne'ilah, 7:45 Ma'ariv and Havdalah, and sounding of the shofar approximately 8 o'clock. Ben wants it to be 8 o'clock, so we'll try to do it at 8 o'clock. Just one quick story to share with you, and then we'll be at Yigdal. Many years ago, I shared this with folks at the shul, and I think it's probably the favorite story that I've ever told. And it has to do with the Brisker Rav, who was a Rav in Brooklyn, and a student comes to him, and the student's having trouble with his wife, and so the Brisker Rav says, "What's the trouble?" And the student says, "She won't listen to me, and what bothers me the most is she won't take my garbage out. She won't take the garbage out." So the Brisker Rav rubs his beard. He says, "I will think about this matter." So the next morning, the Brisker Rav shows up at the student's house at about 7:15 in the morning, and the student says, "Rav, what are you doing here? Can I help you? Can I do anything for you? Do you want some tea? And the Brisker Rav says to the student, No, I'm just here to take out your garbage, okay? I'm here to take your garbage out. So, what you think is below you is not below me," trying to teach the student a lesson. So, garbage collection day in Owings Mills is Tuesday. And I think it was the first year I was here, and I'm feeling pretty puffed up about myself. It's my first time in the pulpit at Rosh Hashanah, it's Bethel, it's all this stuff. Like last week was also Tuesday. And I got all my stuff together, and I'm hurrying out the door, and I open the door, garage door goes up, I'm getting ready to get in the car, and I hear Becky's voice from in the kitchen. She says, "Steve, don't forget to take out the garbage." All right? And so this year as well, it was a don't forget to take out the garbage. And it's the people who know us the best, who have shared the most time with us, who remind us who we really are, and also who we really need to be. So we all need someone to tell us to take out the garbage. I believe that with all of my heart and all of my soul. Yigdal you can find on page 250.
יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח נמצא ועינת אל מציאותו אחד ואין יחיד כייחודו נעלם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף לא נערוך אליו קדושתו קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר יורה גדולתו ומלכותו שפע נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביט את תמונתו תורת אמת נתן לעמו על יד נביאו למען ביתו לא יחליפה אל ולא ימיר דתו לעולמים לזולתו צופה ויודע שתראינו מביט לסוף דבר וקדמתו גומל לאיש חסד כמפעלו נותן לרשע רע כרישתו ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו לפתות מחקקת ישועתו מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו ברוך הדיית שם תהילתו מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו ברוך הדיית שם תהילתו יברכך אדוני וישמרך
May the Lord bless you and protect you.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך
May the Lord show you kindness and be gracious to you.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
Bestowing favor upon you, granting you health and peace in a sweet new year.
Amen.
Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova, and good Yantav. Thank you for your adept arc opening.
Not the only measure of my skill.
Michael, well done. Felt like old times.
It sure did.
Just a little warmer.
Except a little warmer, and I also didn't have the, trouble singing like I used to. My God, like for 2 years. Frightening. Every note I sang, I'm like, is this the last note that's gonna come out before I go croak?
I don't remember that.
Oh man.
So you've grown in confidence.
Yeah. At least that. That was great. How many people came?
There were like 60 people here. I counted.
I mean, not only was it, fun,
More than
but they were also really participatory.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That was good.
That's this crowd, right?
That's right. That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
my dyscalculia prohibits me from counting people in a room. It's very hard.
Frida, hi. Happy New Year.
I was so because I didn't see her last time.
I listened
So
for
there was no time we could rest.
not. I mean, listen. I couldn't watch the whole thing, but I listened to you and I spoke, and I heard and Melvin also. It was very nice.
You got a sharp edge in your leg, and I just.
By the way, I appreciate it. I don't think it's up to
Totally, totally.
Tomorrow,
Think so.
Still,
See you tomorrow. Sleep tight.
another person like that.